Then who was flickering the lights? Nosferatu!
One of my most anticipated films of the year has just had its time in the spotlight, and thankfully, it did not disappoint. Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. From the start, it felt like a match made in heaven. A director that has now proven himself 3 times over to be a master of historical fiction and horror, adapting one of the most influential horror films of all time, based on Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's a slam dunk if I've ever heard of one. It's hard to break down Nosferatu's greatest elements, but most of its excellence can be immediately felt from the very first scene of the film, where Lily-Rose Depp's Ellen pleads out into the darkness calling for something. We're never explicitly told why she makes this plea, and we never really need to know. Eggers starts out the gate swinging by highlighting the gorgeous lighting, cinematography, and stellar acting of Depp, and far and away, these are the biggest strengths of the film. If you've been feeling let down lately with so many modern films and series feeling like they lack any weight or consideration regarding the cinematography, well, leave it up to the mastermind behind The Lighthouse to once again show Hollywood how to light a fucking movie. There's incredibly clever uses of shadows to convey the presence and power of Count Orlok. So many images and scenes are just permanently etched into my brain with how Eggers uses the lighting and camera work to motivate the emotions of every scene. The camera creeps around the characters like a vulture circling in the sky around its prey. The music drowns you in this horrible, depressing world, from dread and depression to love and even hope. Eggers and cinematographer Jaron Blaschke use so many carefully thought out shots to make you feel like you're watching romantic era paintings come to life. Everyone in the cast is putting in some of their best work, from Aaron Taylor Johnson to former veterans that Eggers has worked with like Ralph Ineson and Willem Dafoe, but the true stars are the main trio of Lily-Rose Depp, Nicholas Hoult, and most importantly, Bill Skarsgård as the pure evil Count Orlok. I cannot emphasize enough how incredible the transformation is of Bill Skarsgård. You will not believe the sound of his voice throughout the film. It's borderline almost insulting to Skarsgård himself. He is so utterly incredible, from his mannerisms to the look in his soulless eyes, that I guarantee not a single person who watches this film could ever guess that it was him without already knowing he was cast in the film. I wouldn't be surprised if Eggers performed some ancient pagan ritual to conjure a real-life vampire and just lied about Skarsgård's casting to cover up the truth. I was watching Lily-Rose Depp and Nicholas Hoult acting with a real vampire, and you can't convince me otherwise. His characterization and writing is also stellar, and works alongside his performance to make him so delightful to watch in every scene. He could have easily been depicted as some love-struck tortured soul, or a hunter stalking his prey in Depp, but instead, he's an overwhelming sickness and disease that infects the entire town of Wisborg, Germany. An insatiable, unstoppable force from the deepest depths of hell. On that note, Nicholas Hoult is also incredible and displays so much vulnerability and humanity in his performance. He maybe had my favorite one of the film aside from Skarsgård, given how much he had to sell the fear and panic that someone would feel encountering something so otherworldly and inhuman. The scene where Holt's Thomas Hutter meets Orlok for the first time is perfect, as if Hoult walked into a nightmare taken directly from Silent Hill. Orlok stalks in the background with incredible camera work that highlights his mysterious power, with his voice pounding through the room. When I rewatch Nosferatu, it'll be just to rewatch this introduction to Orlok again. Going into the film, most of my knowledge of Nosferatu revolved around the copyright and legal issues with the original 1922 release that led to the destruction of many of the original copies. I knew that it was an adaptation of Dracula, but what I didn't realize until watching Eggers' adaptation is that it really is just the story of Bram Stoker's classic novel. From the main character being a real estate worker who visits the Count to sell him property in his hometown, to being trapped in his castle and having to find his way back home whilst the vampire journeys aboard a ship to then seek out his beloved back in the hometown, featuring supporting characters like the deranged Renfield and the Dr. Van Helsing, I was surprised by how faithful the story of Nosferatu is to the original story. This faithfulness was actually a strength, because it helped highlight the original elements that Eggers brought to the story, specifically regarding Depp's heroine, Ellen Hutter. The whole story truly rests on her shoulders, and she ends up being one of the more memorable and tragic horror film protagonists that I've seen in quite some time. The film starts and ends with her, truly focusing on her internal struggles of loneliness and repressed sexual temptations that are answered by Orlok, whose character can perfectly be summed up with one line he delivers in the film: "I am an appetite." This idea of repressed sexual temptation is constant through the film, and embodied by other characters like Thomas. When Orlok is killing his victims and draining their blood, he does it directly from their heart, feeding on them in a manner that is as erotic as it is disturbing. Eggers could have easily depicted Thomas as a neglectful and selfish husband who inadvertently pushes Ellen away from him towards a forbidden, almost taboo romance with Orlok. And while there are elements of this idea in the film, Eggers takes a more nuanced and relatable approach to their relationship that I think really benefits the characters and stakes of the story. Ellen and Thomas truly love each other. While Thomas may push Ellen away in his drive to provide for his family, and Ellen is drawn to Orlok given the bond that they share from her once forgotten desperate plea, the situation isn't black and white, and the love that the two possess for one another is being destroyed by Orlok, bringing out the worst in the both of them in order to have Ellen succumb to her eternal pledge to the darkness. And that's not just me saying that, it's literally the tagline for the poster. There's room for discussion about what Orlok represents for Ellen and how she feels about Nosferatu and her marriage. At best, Orlok represents an inner desire from Ellen that she is desperately trying to suppress in an attempt to forge a new life with Thomas, whom she truly loves and trusts. At worst, Orlok is death itself, unfeeling and unadulterated, sweeping over the town of Wisborg like an infinite shadow, ready to extinguish every last speck of light until Ellen belongs to him, or until Ellen finally gives in to her appetite. It all culminates in an incredible final act and ending that I was glued to. Despite the film's runtime of over 2 hours, which many other horror films may struggle with maintaining good pacing, Nosferatu felt effortless. I didn't know what direction the story would take towards the end, but I was completely locked in, and I could have easily spent even more time in this beautiful nightmare that Eggers has created. He doesn't waste a single minute of the runtime. I've heard some online sentiment growing about Eggers being overrated, pretentious, and some other criticism that feels very disingenuous. And if you're not a fan of any of his previous work, Nosferatu won't change your mind. And you're welcome to criticize his work however you like, but no one can convince me that Eggers does not put in the work for his films. He brings out some incredible performances in his actors, and his commitment to historical authenticity is so palpable it really elevates his films. He brought in special crew from the New England area in order to construct historically accurate architecture for The Witch. He used actual lighthouse keepers' journals as inspiration for the dialogue in the lighthouse. He collaborated with an Icelandic writer to help develop The Northman. You can criticize his film style all you like, but you'll never convince me that this man doesn't love the work that he does. The greatest compliment I can give to Robert Eggers is that his work, more than anything, highlights how much he loves the art of film. So here's how I'd rank Nosferatu alongside Eggers' other films, although I very much need to rewatch The Witch and The Lighthouse. It's been years since I've seen both of them. All 4 of his films are so distinct from one another, yet they all have his signature strong characters, backed by an incredible story and performances, and an authenticity to history that makes you feel like you're watching a real event that's been lost to time. One final note I'd like to make regarding Eggers as a filmmaker, and one strength that I've noticed among many of the greatest filmmakers, is how much thought they put into the opening and ending shots of their films. I think it takes a director with very clear passion for the art form to start their movies off on the perfect note, and to be able to win the audience over in less than a minute, and then to later end the film on a final shot that stays with the viewer long after the film ends. Think of films like Oppenheimer, that open with that incredible opening text regarding the fate of Prometheus, and ending with Oppenheimer envisioning the destruction of all life. Eggers is no exception to this rule, and particularly with the ending shots of all of his previous films, I love the feeling he leaves you with when you finish The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, and now Nosferatu, which probably contains my favorite ending shot of the 4. It's so good in so many ways, but primarily because it captures the entirety of what his adaptation on Nosferatu is all about. The ending shot of Nosferatu, like the entire film, is haunting, disturbing, and beautiful.